All right. Record myself. I'm going to say good morning, everybody. Happy, I don't know, end of October. We've got Halloween coming up this week. How exciting. And okay, let's let a couple more people in. All right. So I'm going to share with you the training for next Monday, which we've all just discovered is how to host an incredible open house. You want traffic, you want people to register. We know how to do it. If you've ever worked for a builder, you know the secrets. And if you've ever been to one of Lisa Campfire's, how many people you get, Lisa?
I've had 12 families.
Yeah. So this is how you do it. We're going to get you some good people. So we're going to go over how to host a successful open house. So if you want to learn how to do that, that's going to be next Monday's topic. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to get started. Hold on. Let me do this. Let's do this one. Hello, Miss Jill. See Miss Jill Hennenberg on there. Let's see. Play from slideshow from start. Okay. And then let's go ahead and share screen. Can everybody see my contract roulette screen? Online, can you guys all see it? Can anybody unmute and tell me they can see it?
Yes,
Yeah.
we see it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's play. I really don't even know how to play roulette, but I just thought it was cute, right? So we're going with roulette. Okay. So we're going to play a little true or false game to get started. Let's get it, mix it up. If a buyer wants to ask for a percentage for their closing costs to go towards their buyer's commission, should they use the GG addenda? This is a free, safe space here, guys. What do we think? Is it the GG? True or false? Yell it out. Who thinks true?
False.
We got a lot of people thinking false. Anybody think it's true? Yeah, so Flavia thinks isn't the GG catch-all for everything. Anybody else have a thought?
No,
What's the FF?
FF's catch.
FF. It is not the GG. It is the FF. So what we're going to do for a second is we're going to stop our share. We're going to share over here in this screen, which is where over here. We're going to admit more people. Okay. And I'm going to show, oops, I'm going to, hold on. Good Lord. Okay, so just getting like, I got to admit people, I've got to do all these things. Okay, we're going to just go over here real quick and we're going to take a quick peek at why it's the FF. So everybody knows the FF is the catch-all. But we're going to talk a little bit about it. If anybody has a question. So if the buyer wants to request, this is the buyer, remember. The buyer has entered into a separate brokerage agreement. That's what they're talking about here. And at closing, the seller is agreeing, good Lord, admit all. Okay, there we go. At closing, the seller is agreeing to pay the buyer, not the buyer's broker here, the buyer, and the sum of this percentage, the dollar amount, or a percentage plus a dollar amount, right? Like if you wanted to add your transaction. That's what's happening right here. Now, they're also saying if in the event that you have maybe a debt to income ratio problem or something like that, and the lender says they can't actually, let's say they said 3%, but they're like, okay, I'm sorry, we can't cover 3%. That exceeds your debt to income ratio. We can only pay 2.5%. You'd want to select this first one because that means the extra 0.5% will be paid direct from the seller to the buyer broker. If you check this one, that means the seller gets the other 0.5% back. So even though the buyer asked for 3%, you're not getting the 3%, you're only getting 2.5%. Follow me? Now, does it mean that the buyer doesn't have to pay for it? Yes, the buyer would still be paying your 0.5%. It's just that the seller gets away with not having to pay for it, even though they agreed. You follow me? Doesn't mean that the buyer's agent is not getting paid 3% because they will if their buyer broker agreement says 3%. Are we following? Now, if the buyer broker agreement said 2.5%, It doesn't mean that you're going to get 3 if this is 3, because this does not modify your buyer broker agreement. You have to modify your buyer broker agreement before this, before closing. Now, if you wrote 2.5%, let's just say, on your buyer broker agreement, why'd you do that? I don't know. That's a question for another day. But let's say you did.
I have a nice subdivision.
And you went into contract, right? And you went into contract and now you got 3. It doesn't matter if you modify it later. As long as your buyer broker agreement shows that you got into a buyer broker agreement before you started showing, it doesn't matter how many times you modify that buyer broker agreement. First, they're going into a new construction, you change it. Now they're going into a resale, you change it. It doesn't matter. You can modify the agreement 50 times. It's irrelevant. Nobody cares how many times you modify the agreement. What they care about is that before you started showing homes, you had a buyer broker agreement. I've gotten that question many times. Everybody good on that? Now, one other thing. This is the seller agreeing to pay the buyer. So when we go in on this, oftentimes we get flack when the seller has agreed in the listing agreement on the 10A or the 10, what's really the 10A, that they're going to pay through the listing agent. They want us to come in on the seller's broker to buyer's broker. You follow me? That's okay. We can switch forms. But if we're going to switch forms, I'm going to recommend when you go in with seller's broker to buyer's broker, you also go in with the GG at the same time. Because what the seller's broker to buyer's broker form is they're agreeing the same thing. But instead of the seller paying to the buyer, it's the seller's broker paying to the buyer's broker. But unfortunately, what we've seen is they think they're outside of the contract and they're going to mess up the deal. So as long as you put this one in here, this makes it contingent for the buyer that they come to terms within 3 days, unless you change that date, which you could do here. So in case they get a little bit naughty and want to go off the rails and keep changing the agreement, this should go along with seller's broker to buyer's broker. Everybody understand what I said? It's complicated, so I'm happy to repeat that. That's if they try to change, if you go in on the FF and they say, please change to seller's broker to buyer's broker. No problem. Do the GG along with it. Because just because you're trying to accommodate what they're asking for, you better make sure that you're also giving your buyer, if you're on the buyer side, that's when it's going to happen, right? The opportunity to cancel this contract if they try to pull a fast one on you. I've seen it twice now. Now, Mike, he had an agreement. We went in on the FF. The seller agreed to pay 3%. They agreed with everything. Then the agent decided to get cheeky and added his transaction fee. And the buyer's like, what does suddenly go? That's not what the seller agreed to. Then he said, you know what? Now I changed my mind. The seller's agent, now we're only giving you 2.5%. He kept changing the offer. Not the seller, by the way, the seller's agent. Could we go after him? Yeah, we probably can. But unfortunately, the buyers really wanted to buy the house. He kept changing the deal over and over and over again. How can we prove who's changing the deal, him or the sellers? We'd probably really have to get an attorney involved, the reality of that story. But sadly, really, the buyers wanted the dang house. That's
after the original.
yes, after, yep.
And he told me he was gonna make sure I get paid before.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was a total jerk. So unfortunately, this is the problem. He needed to go in with the GG, so just to cover him. But at the end of the day, this is what happens. These listing agents think they're God and that they could change the agreement. Remember, who is party to the agreement? Buyer and seller only. But unfortunately, when the buyer really wants it, you're kind of held to whatever's going to happen here. Would I love to go after him after the fact? Absolutely. Code of ethics all day long, but we're not closed yet. So this is where we stand. This is what's happening. Okay, everybody okay with, not okay. There's nothing okay about what happened, but this is why I'm saying if you're going to go in with seller's broker to buyer's broker, go in with the GG also. Make it contingent. Everybody clear? Okay. Now I'm going to stop that share and go back to our roulette. Share screen. Let's go to the roulette screen, share. All right, now here's this one. Here it is. If a husband bought the home before getting married and the wife is not on the deed, do you only need to put the husband's name on the contract?
No.
Well,
Um,
I tricked you a little bit. It depends if it's a homesteaded property, right? Because if it's not a homesteaded property, it doesn't really matter because many people do that, husband and wife. They buy multiple properties. They'll buy some in the husband's name, some in the wife's name. But if it's a homesteaded property, it has to be in both of their names, always. So that was a tricky one because I'm a trickster. Everybody clear on that one?
Say, don't.
You could, if you don't know, you could. And here's another one. Let's take this to the next step. What if the guy owned the property, he gets married. Now they're getting divorced. Does he need to put her on the property? Do you need to put her on the property? They're in the middle of a divorce.
Yes.
Absolutely. If it's a homesteaded property, because in the state of Florida, you're either married or you're not. They don't care about divorced and they don't care about separated. So that is absolutely true.
And if they're married and like, say they're separated, but he's buying something new, doesn't she have to sign?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Teresa said if they're married, but they're in the process of, they're separated and he's buying something new, doesn't she still have to sign? The answer is yes, because the state of Florida also does not recognize separated. You're still married. In the state of Florida's eyes, you're either married or you're not. Separated does not,
Situation.
yes.
The buyer.
Carrie,
For divorce, so he could buy something.
Mm-hmm. Yes, who's question? Mhm.
Is there quit claim in Florida? I mean, can the wife quit claim a deed over and
Yes, but again, you can quit claim a deed, but if it's a homesteaded property, remember that's not always as simple as quit claiming the deed.
Okay.
If there's a mortgage or something like that, the mortgage company's not going to be so easy to say, okay, you quit claim the deed. The spouse does have rights over the property because it's a homesteaded property, even quit claimed. So you definitely want to get an attorney involved. Yeah, it's a lot sloppier here in the state of Florida when it comes to homestead in that sense. Also, it's a lot great, right? There's a lot more protection. So it depends on what side you're looking at from there. Okay, true or false? The time for deposit is based on business days. Anyone think that's true?
no. It's calendar days.
Correct. Everything in every one of our contracts is calendar days. What about the MLS, guys? Everything in the MLS is business days. So when we say, when I get a call on the weekend, Carrie, you have to pen this. No, I don't. I mean, I know you may want me to pen it. That's a different story, right? But it's not because of MLS rules. The 48 hours is 2 business days. So if you got a contract on Saturday, Monday, Tuesday doesn't need to pen until Tuesday, right? So that's the thing. MLS is always business days and everything in the contract is calendar days. Now that counts for counting, but remember, if it lands, and this could be inspection, this could be any other date that you have going on. If it lands on a Saturday or Sunday, it moves over to the next business day or holiday. Correct. So if your inspection ends on a Saturday, it really goes until Monday, unless Monday's a holiday. Then it would go till Tuesday. Keep that in mind because a lot of people can be very sneaky there, and a lot of people don't understand that either. So that is something that's really important. You understand that. That's all dates.
And that ends at.
Except for
midnight,
effective.
right? 5 p.m.
And everything in the contract ends at midnight, 11:59 actually. There's no more 5 p.m. rule, which is super sad because I loved that. That was a really good one. Okay, true or false? Addenda GG is only used if the seller has already agreed to an offer of compensation. Well, anybody think it's true? Teresa does?
No, just give 3 days. to get that out.
Correct. It's not. It is not used only, and it actually doesn't even have to be used even if the seller had already agreed to compensation, because it could be seller to buyer's broker. So that's what the confusion is, guys. The difference is between the FF and the GG. The FF, the seller is paying the buyer. The buyer is paying the broker. The GG, the seller is either paying the broker or the seller's broker is paying the broker, not the buyer. The buyer's out of it in the GG. The buyer is the one who's using the money to pay. That's the difference. The FF, the buyer is the one in control. The GG, the seller is paying direct, either to the buyer's broker or the seller's broker is paying. Everybody clear on that? So just think, if the buyer's the one doing it, it's the FF. If the buyer's out of it, it's the GG. Clear? True or false? If you have 3 vacant lots being sold with no improvements on them, you still need 3 contracts that are separate. What do you think? True or false? These are ones that make you think, don't they? Everyone's sort of looking at that going,
Ya están analizándose para las votaciones. Tenemos que alistarnos. No, es que no podemos.
yeah, someone was like, really had a lot to say about that.
Good morning.
So, what do you think? Okay, it was a trick question. So maybe I just tricked you all. The trickster that I am, you think was April 1st, well, don't you? So here's the trick. If they are different owners, you need different contracts. If they're the same owners, right? Because it could be like, let's say the mom is on all 3, but one she owns with, you know, one son, one with another son, like I have 3 kids, and one with my other son. You would need 3 separate contracts. But if I owned all 3 with all 3 boys, then I could use one contract for all 3 and put.
Even if they're separate parcels.
Doesn't matter, because you could put it as a semblance on one contract listing all parcel IDs, because it's not improved. It simply determines based upon who the owners are, is there improvements, and you know how they're going to title it. Okay, everybody good with that? Is TV mounted?
Carrie,
Yes.
Sorry, can I just ask, is that even if the lots are not next to each other, even if they're 3 completely separate, different lots?
If they're in different counties, no, you need separate contracts. I would suggest, and you know, also you'd have to talk to the title company on that one. But usually I was referencing if they're close to each other, if they're assemblable. But no, if they're like in 3 separate, completely different areas, no, you need 3 separate contracts.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. TV mount, great question though. Thanks, Janice. Is TV mounting hardware supposed to convey, guys? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that had been added to the contract in October 2021. All right. If you have a VA contract, the purchase price is 500, you deposit 10 grand. How much is your balance to close?
-10.
What does anybody else think? A lot of silence. Mike?
0.
You got a 0.
Financing 100%.
100% financing.
Balance to close. would be-
Flavia, we had this conversation. Remember that person that wouldn't put in your offer? Right, so how much is balance to close?
Would be -10.
Put in your offer.
So give credit.
I know. It is -10,000. And the reason is because if the loan is 500,000, right? They have to put down an earnest deposit. Whatever the earnest deposit is what the balance to close is. They get it back. Because it has nothing. Yeah, you were 100% right. You were right, Teresa. She had it right. So VA, USDA, any 100% product, whatever your deposit is your balance to close in negative. You get it back. Now they could put it towards closing costs or whatever, but that's not what the balance to close is about, right? Is everybody clear on that? Now I mentioned Flavia because -10,000. Well, I did because she had a contract. They would not put her offer in because she wrote negative 10,000. It wasn't these numbers. And the stupid agent would not put her offer in. Could you imagine? And she called me. She's like, Carrie, am I doing this right? I said, of course you're doing it right.
Cause the buyer wants to see.
Yes. Absolutely. And the agent's like, well, the seller won't understand this. It doesn't matter. It's correct. That's how it works. Thank God they ended up buying something else. But that poor seller, it didn't get the offer because their agent was so stupid. Yeah. This is what we're dealing with. See, when I say there's no such thing as stupid things, that was very stupid, right? And that poor seller lost out on a really good offer. So there we have it. All right, everybody clear on that? Is there any confusion on that? Okay. True or false?
False.
The closing date, should we put on or before? Does anybody think that's a good idea? Hold on, I'm gonna look at everybody. Does anybody think that's a good? The attorneys did not write on or before on this part of the contract. Let's just take a little peek, shall we? We're just gonna take a little peek because I think this is a very important, oh, I have to stop this one, hold on. Okay, now I have to go in and share, stop share. Can you guys all see my contract up here online? Can everybody unmute and tell me if you see the contract? Casey.
Yes.
Okay,
We can see it.
thank you. Now, I want you to notice that the time for acceptance of offers says to all parties on or before on line 45 this time. That's when it's accepted. You see how the attorneys wrote that? They actually put it in there. So we know they know those words. We're clear that an attorney understands on or before, right? But yet on closing date, they chose to say the closing shall occur on. They did not write it. Do we think they forgot? I mean, I don't think the attorneys forgot. The reason they did not forget is because if you wrote on or before, do the sellers and buyers understand when it's closing? That means it could close that day, or the day before, or 3 days before, or tomorrow, right? We don't know. It's a guess, which means you don't have an executed contract. They consider that a non-effected contract. So that means, let's say you had some agent like Mike had who decided to play games. He could because you don't have an executed contract. That's exactly what could happen. And they could do it right off of if you wrote in on or before. I hate to tell you, whose fault would that be? I'm just saying. This is why you got to understand the importance of never writing in on or before here. Yeah, and you don't want that one to fall on you. That would be a bad one. So, okay. Can you all see the true or false too now? If I can just go back, can I toggle? Does everybody online see that? Can someone
Yes.
Oh, that's so great. I don't have to stop share. Oh my God, this is so great. Okay, moving on. Yes. All right. So if the MLS says washer and dryer will convey, but the buyer's agent didn't write it on the contract, do we have to include it because the MLS said it? What do you guys think? I have some yeses in here. What do you guys online say? I'm going to stop my share because I want to look at some people that are newer with me. What do you guys think? What do you think, Julia? What do you think, Jill? What do you think, Lewis? You guys are newer with me. Do you think you have to include it because the MLS said it?
If it's not written in the contract, it doesn't have to stay.
I like how Julia talks. What do you think, Jill? I get you're muted.
I don't actually know the answer, but I always put it anyway.
I love how you think too. Anybody else? What about you, Lewis?
Yeah, yeah, I always put it in a contract just to be safe.
Well, what if it wasn't in the contract? You're the listing agent. You said it's supposed to convey. Someone gives you a contract that doesn't write it in there. Does it have to convey?
I mean, I'm going to say
Yeah.
yes, but I don't know the answer, honestly. I just make sure I always put everything that's in the MLS, I copy and paste onto the contract.
I would say yes, because you've already written on the MLS, letting people know it conveys.
Okay, here's the beautiful thing, guys. Ready? Here's the answer. It does not have to convey. The MLS is merely an opportunity for people to share information. On the bottom of every page, it says it is not to be relied upon. I am ad-libbing. It is not to be relied upon. It's merely an opportunity for people to share information. So I'm going to share my screen again. And now we're going to take a quick little peeky here, and we're going to look at the contract real quick because it's so much more fun. And we're going to see here, and we know it doesn't say here, obviously a washer and dryer, right? So if it does not write in here washer and dryer, you're not getting a washer and dryer. It doesn't matter what. If you wrote per MLS, which I have seen a billion times, what happened? Oh, dang it. I gotta hit escape. Now can everybody see the contract?
I would make
Okay.
sure what's in that paragraph is microwave is not in
Ye-
there.
Microwave is in there. Mm-hmm. Yep, range ovens. It's a microwave oven. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll be fine with that. But what you're not fine with, guys, is things like a Ring doorbell. Ring doorbell is not written in there. They have a doorbell, but it doesn't say Ring. Is a Ring doorbell a fixture, guys?
Yes.
I love that we get this. This is so fun. What makes a fixture, guys?
Attached to the house.
How is it attached? Is it screws? Is it nailed? Is it glued? There are three definitions to an attachment. The real definition that they go by in real estate is if it's removed, it destroys what was there before. So like it takes off molding or something like that. And a Ring doorbell does not. So a Ring doorbell is not an attachment. Therefore, if it does not written in here, it does not actually necessarily convey. But does it? It says doorbell, but it doesn't say ring. And if you take off a ring, is there a doorbell attached on the house? Of course, every house has a doorbell. So here's the problem. What it does do is it holds up a closing for stupidity. Yeah. So we had one, it was actually Tatiani. This house was 1.5 million. A stupid Ring doorbell was like one of the cheap ones, right? Well, she never thought to ask the seller, are you going to take your old Ring doorbell with you? They never asked the buyer, are you going to take the Ring doorbell? You know what happened at closing? She had to give $1,500 for a Ring doorbell. Can I ask you how much a Ring doorbell is going to ever cost? $1,500. Here's a fun one. This was Peter Lou. What do you guys think of the solar lights that go to the house that you could buy in Sam's for how much, right? Well, he never asked the seller, you going to take those with you? Do you see them here, guys? Those solar lights? They just stick in the ground. They're not attachments and they're not written here. You never asked the seller, are you going to take them with? The buyer never asked, the buyer's agent never asked the buyer, do you really want those solar lights that lead up to the house? Never talked about it. Well, guess what happened at closing? The walkthrough came and they took them. $2,500 later from some stick in the ground solar lights. That's what it took to close that house. 2.5 million for some solar lights. Because you're desperate, you just want to close and you don't care. Here's another one. I forgot which advisor we had. We were on the list side, of course. The house was only like, I don't know, 650. These are my favorites. Now, it does say, we all see this, blinds, draperies. So we should have told this to our seller, but I forget who the advisor was, didn't go over very well. And I know exactly where these blinds come from because of the situation. Target, cream, plain blinds. They took them. The buyers were so upset. So we knew exactly where they bought it from. They moved to Colorado, by the way. It was a relocation. Yes, it was a relocation agent. Anyway, it wasn't you, Teresa, right? No, thank God. Okay, anyway, so what wasn't our, I mean, the sellers just took them, right? So we're like, we'll just give you a credit. They're from Target. No, we want those blinds. We have to have those blinds. They had to mail them back from Colorado. Yeah, people just get stupid at closing. Now, the worst one, guys, we all know what they are. Chandeliers. Okay, they are lights. And if you write a chandelier is not conveying, but you forget to check it here, you're buying a chandelier. And you're going to be the one buying it. That's just how it is. So I'm going to tell you, if there's a chandelier, you better brownie box that thing out. You better get that thing down because chandeliers are a nightmare. Yeah.
I have a question for you. What's your opinion on you're on the list side and the seller says, when I remove my art, do you want me to remove the hardware and patch and paint it? And then you ask, well, how old is the paint? Because you know that the paint may not match. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, so Teresa's question is, the seller asked, should I remove my art and then patch and paint it? And she said, you know how the hardware, you know how old it is, it probably won't match. Okay, here's the beauty. The holes are not something that is cosmetic, that's never required to fix. My answer is no. Do not remove it and do not fill it and do not change it. Leave it in there. Absolutely. Because as soon as you start doing that, exactly, maybe they'll reuse them. And as soon as you start fixing it, you're going to make a bigger mess than if you had left it. Yeah. Per the contract, you don't want to touch it, but you could end up making a bigger mess. Who was it? Oh my God. They tried to fix the outside of the house. They painted half the house. It didn't match. Oh my God, it was a mess. They ended up having to paint the whole, it was a mess. Yeah, you don't want it because the sun in Florida is so strong. It changes the color so much. Even if you think you're matching it, you're not. It's a mess. Don't do it. Okay, so everybody good with that? I mean, you maybe not.
Big potted plants.
Oh, big potted plants. And another one, guys, let's just talk about this one. Hello, you have a smart home. We see a lot of smart homes, but it's really not the equipment of the smart homes. It's the one thing that actually is the brain of the smart home. You need to make sure that they're going to program the brain of the smart home. Sometimes the people take it with them. Sometimes they don't reprogram it. If they don't reprogram the brain of the smart home, you have a dumb home. Because you can't do anything with any of the equipment. So if you are the one listing the home, you better find out what is the device that controls all the equipment. What do you have to do to make sure it's ready for the new seller, the new buyer? Were you planning on taking that, right? We need to let the people know. If you're the one representing the buyer, you better ask those questions because nothing is dealt with here in the contract. And that is a big mess. If you move in, you think you can use all this great equipment and you can't use any of it. So that's another big one that's not, addressed here in the contract. So I'm going to tell you, be careful with that one. Okay. Are we good so far? Great. Are we having fun? Isn't this fun? So much fun. All right. If the contract is subject to a lease, how many days does the listing agent have to give the buyer the lease? What do we think? This is an important one, guys, because we get this a lot. I hear 7. Do I hear anything else? 3. What else do I have? I get a 10. When you go into contract, if you said subject to a lease, remember the person buying the home is purchasing it minus some of the ownership rights. They don't have usage rights. They don't have quiet enjoyment. There's 5 bundle of rights. They're minus 2. So they have to look at the contract, make sure they feel comfortable with everything. And it's contingent upon that, right? Right. So you have to give them the contract with the tenant, and they have a certain amount of days to get it and a certain amount of days to review it. And it's contingent on that.
Your guess 5.
Your pure guess wins. Bing, bing, bing. It is 5 days. They have 5 days to receive that contract, 5 days to review it. So just remember lucky 5, because it's 5. 5 days that you have to give it to them. That's why when you go on a listing. Yeah, that's what it was. You knew that it was 2 of them. That's right. So 5 days that you have to give it within 5 days of the effective date, and then 5 days to review it. And I know we've talked about this, and I don't know if it's a question here, but I'm just going to ask. And if you've taken my class before, which many of you have, you cannot answer this question. If you are new, this is for my new people with me. I have done a deal with Shandy. Shandy, you and I have been back and forth with this deal. Finally, my seller, who has just been exhausting, has agreed. And I have got the contract back in your inbox on Thursday at 11:59 p.m. But of course, you're a normal, reasonable human being, so you're sleeping. But the next day, obviously you're in fabulous shape. You go work out. And then at noon, you take your buyers out to lunch to give them the great news. What day is the effective date? If you're with me, you cannot say, Is the effective date Thursday or Friday? You guys who are newer with me, what is it? Julia, Lewis, Sue, you could say. Who else is new? What do you guys think?
Thursday.
Julia thinks Thursday.
No,
do
oh, I wasn't clear. What day at 11:59 did they receive the contract? Was it Thursday or Friday?
Thursday. That's
Then
when it came into
the
the inbox.
effective date is
change.
Friday.
You
The
think the
effective
effective
date is
date is
Friday then.
Friday? What do you think, Lewis?
I think it's Thursday because the day you actually receive it.
Okay, Lewis thinks Thursday. Who else we have on who's newer with me? Anybody? Jill, are you there? Jill might have stepped away. Okay. Oh, you're on the phone. No problem. Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Anybody else want to guess? Thursday? Anybody else? What do you guys think? Thursday or Friday? How many people think Thursday? How many people think Friday? I
Hey,
love that. What do you think?
question. When was the contract signed, executed?
Signed on Thursday.
I think Thursday.
All right, here's the answer. Everybody ready? Drum roll. Thursday. Because it was delivered into Shandy's inbox at 11:59. It doesn't matter when it was delivered to the customers because what if they were on a cruise for like a week, right? She's their representative. It was delivered into their inbox at 11:59 p.m. So therefore, the date that we start counting from is Thursday. So if we say the effective date, the money's due in 3 days. Okay, those who are newer with me, the money's due in 3 days. When is it due? Lewis, what do you think? When's the money due?
It's due on Sunday, but since it's on a weekend, it would be due on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, due on Sunday, but since it's a weekend, it would be technically due on Monday.
What do you think, Julia? Annie, what do you think?
I think the same thing unless Monday's a holiday.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to guess? What do you guys think?
Was Thursday the effective day?
Thursday's the effective day.
I mean, it would be.
Anybody else think anything different? Going once, going twice. Sold. It is due on Monday. Because Thursday's effective date, we start counting Friday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it obviously rolls to Monday. Unless Monday was a holiday, then it would be due Tuesday. Absolutely. You never count the day that it's effective. You start counting the next day. So many people mess that up. So if it's effective Thursday, you count Friday. Yes, you may, Miss Casey.
Since we're coming into the holidays.
Yes.
And we have Christmas and New Year's.
Yes, of course.
What days are actually holidays?
The holiday is that day, the 25th, the 1st. Yes, the holidays are not the 24th and the 31st.
These are still business.
Yeah, they're still business days. Good questions. They may not, you may not be able to actually deliver the money, and that would be interesting. So that's what I say, when you count your days and you put things in, make sure you're accounting for things like holidays, because the whole week of Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, it gets all cloudy. Yes, it gets all fun. Okay, moving along. You guys are doing so good in my game. Everybody having fun? I am. All right. Now, if the contract says may not assign, but the buyer needs to add another person to the contract for the loan, can they? What do you guys think? We got a yes. What do we think? What do you think? Jill, you think so? You want to add something?
No.
I mean, I wouldn't think so.
Jill thinks no.
I think you can because you're not assigning it to them, you're just adding them on.
I love so much fun. So that was something I actually learned from Phil Logus several years ago. If you make it not assignable, you can't add anybody to your contract. You can't make one change. So even though you're not assigning it to somebody, you're assigning somebody else with you to the contract. So in true assignability, you can't add anybody to the contract. You cannot make one change. So that is why I would say when I am doing a contract, I highly recommend under assignability. Can you all see the contract? Oh, no, you can't. You can't? I thought I stopped that. No, I didn't. I didn't. I didn't. When we get to the assignability section, I highly recommend everybody say, may assign but not be released from liability. That gives you the opportunity to add people if you need to for the loan. If you want to put it in a trust, you can, or an LLC, but you will always close with the original person that signed the contract.
Now, on the listing side, if we see an offer submitted, did we ask why they checked that or just?
Not really, because they're always going to close. That's the beauty of this one. May assign but not be released from liability. Whoever they're submitting the contract, that is the person you will close with. They may be under another name. They may add more people, but it's always that person. So that is nothing to worry about. But I'm going to suggest, because nobody understands it, you, if you're submitting the offer, say, the reason we're saying may assign but not be released from liability is we may put it in a family trust. I'm going to say you're always going to put it in a family trust because it sounds soft and fuzzy and people aren't going to get freaked out. The reality is you're just giving options to your buyer in case is what you're doing, but nobody understands it. They see it and they freak out. That's what happens.
Carrie, isn't this what you use if you're working with an investor that may actually assign it to a different
No,
investor as well?
no.
Okay.
That would be may assign and thereby be released from liability. That is
Okay.
wholesaling. I'm buying it, then I'm going to sell it to Teresa. Teresa's going to sell it to Casey, and then eventually someone is going to close, right? That is wholesaling. That is buyer may assign and thereby be released,
Okay.
right? No, and nobody's ever going to agree to that. But the second one may assign but not be released from liability. That means I bought it. I might add, Lisa to it. Then we're going to add Casey. Then no, Casey's off, but now I'm going to add Teresa, because maybe I'm trying to figure this thing out. Maybe I'll put it in an LLC. Maybe I'll put it in a family trust. But at the end of the day, I'm closing on this sucker one way or another. Right? You follow me? So at least the seller knows I'm the one who submitted my financials. They know I'm the one closing. That's the difference with this one. Where the other one, they have no idea who's closing. If they're going to close because they never saw their financials. That's the problem with the top one. That's why no one's ever going to agree with this one. But if you do may assign and not be released, I may assign this, may not assign this contract, you can't make a change. Yes.
Harry, if it was non-assignable, but they wanted to make a change afterwards and both parties agreed to it
You're
and
fine.
wrote an addendum,
You're
then
fine.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything is always negotiable, right? But the point that I'm going to say is they both have to agree. We had a situation, it was like a $4.5 million contract, and it was not assignable. It was a contentious relationship between buyer and seller, I will say that, and agents as well. And I got a very fiery conversation from the agent on the other side telling me how terrible my agent was, couldn't believe how unprofessional, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, okay. Can you please share with me what's the problem? Well, all we want to do is put it in our LLC and they won't let them. And I looked up the contract and they said may not assign. I said, well, clearly the problem is because you chose not assignable. She didn't even know what it was. So now buyer and seller tried to negotiate. The seller was saying, we'll allow you to change it if you put more money down or whatever the thing was. Well, she didn't want to do those things. See, this is the problem. And the agent who was on the other side didn't understand assignability. She should have made it may assign but not be released from the beginning, knowing that it was supposed to go in an LLC. And this is the problem. You don't work with a $4.5 million buyer and not understand assignability. So let's just say when she closed, she had to re-record that. That cost her a pretty penny, and I don't think that she's going to get a referral. So no bueno for her. But yeah, but to your point, yes, Janice, of course, at any time, as long as buyer and seller can work through something, they can negotiate any point of the contract, but they both have to agree. And that's where it may not go well. Everybody good? Great. Okay. True or false? Under a financing, if you have selected A for cash, does that mean your buyer cannot get a loan? What do we think? Anybody think that's true?
No.
True. It just means there's no financing contingency.
Excellent. Does it mean that because you selected cash that they can't go ahead and get a appraisal done? So I'm going to share that we had a situation, it was during the crazy 2022, where they had selected cash and the seller did not want to allow during the inspection period, the appraiser. Could they stop it? Here's the-
No,
No,
They
it's
can't.
just another inspection.
Per the contract, section, I believe S, says that they're always allowed to inspect the property at any time. How many times are they allowed to inspect the property?
as many times as they want.
Unlimited, exactly. And an appraisal is just one type of inspection. So after a hurricane, can they reinspect?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's no longer contingent, right? But can they reinspect? Absolutely. Now, the one problem is after a hurricane, that does bring up the continued maintenance part of the contract, doesn't it? Because when you have had a hurricane, and if they went into the contract and you had a roof and now you don't, well, guess what? That's going to be affected in the contract, right? So that's a little bit different. Okay. Moving on. Excellent. All right. If your buyer has selected A, oh wait, we already said that one. If your buyer has selected B under finance, yes?
Carrie, can you share your screen?
Oh,
We're not seeing the questions.
did you want me to share my screen?
Thank you.
Right, you're such a problem, Jill. Can you see it now? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. If a buyer has selected under the financing, but has selected the B under the financing, but left the percentage blank, right? Which they so often do. And the rate went from 6.75 to 12. Can they get out under the financing contingency? What do you think?
They still qualify.
It all depends.
On what, Keith?
If they can't afford the payment at 12% and they can no longer qualify for the loan, then it would cover it.
But they still qualify.
They-
They're
Okay,
not
if they
comfortable under that.
qualify,
They are saying it's too expensive, but they still qualify. Can
if
they
they
get out?
qualify, then they qualify and no, they can't get out.
Exactly. Which is why I say never write prevailing and always cap the rate, because this happens. So just to point out where I'm talking about in the contract, stop share over here and do this real quick. When we're talking about financing, right here under line 92, you guys see that one? I have seen, somebody asked me the other day, somebody wrote in
Gotta
PR.
share to us.
Oh, you can't see it? All these sharing, not sharing. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So right here, under line 92, somebody asked me the other day, Carrie, what's this PR? They write PR to be prevailing rate, which is ridiculous because it says if left blank, then the prevailing rate based upon the buyer's credit worthiness. It's ridiculous. You don't need to write PR. It's a percentage, all right? Everybody says that. But the point is, if it went up to 12, that's what they've determined the buyer's credit worthiness is. That's stupid. What you need to do is right here, if the rate today is, what is it, 6.5 or something like that, you're going to go up a half a point. I recommend a half a point higher. Okay. So if it's 6.5, you go to 7. You go up, because if you're going to today's rate, I'm a listing agent, I'm going to kick that back. I'm going to be like, are you crazy? Why would I give to you at today's rate? That's ridiculous. So give yourself a little cushion, right? We all know that the rates bounce. So if you go up a half a point, obviously make sure that their buyers can qualify at a half a point, right? But if you go up a half a point higher, now you've capped it at a reasonable rate. You've given your buyers another contingency, 7% or 6 3/4 or whatever the rate is, right? Today. And this way, if something happens and rates change tomorrow, which guys, guess what? They change all the time and usually not for the better. They have been getting a little better, but let's say they did. Let's say they went up to 8%. Your buyer now can get out because we wrote 7%. That's the point of this. So their credit worthiness would put them at the 8% if that's what the rates went to, right? And maybe they still qualify, but maybe they're just not comfortable at 8%. So this is why you have to fill in. Every one of these blanks are contingencies that are supposed to help your buyers, right? That's why you need to fill them in. Everybody good with that? Great. All right. If a loan approval ended on March 5th and the closing was March 8th, can the seller send a release and cancellation to the buyer on March 6th? What do we think? Let me say it again. The loan approval period ended March 5th and the closing was set for March 8th. Can the seller send a release and cancellation on March 6th? Can that happen?
You can, you just are outside of the contingency.
No, but can the seller send a reach? Lisa says no.
I say no.
Lewis says no. Anybody else want to play my game?
I think there's something missing.
Lisa thinks something is missing. I'm not a trickster. Actually, this one is very straightforward.
And the loan approval period always ends before closing, right? Are you saying they didn't get loan approval?
If the buyer did not send on March 5th a notice to the seller that they've received loan approval and plan to continue, they have not received loan approval but plan to continue, the seller may send a release and cancellation for 3 days. It's right here.
Yes.
You have to notify you.
You have to notify the seller in writing by the loan approval period whether or not the buyer shall proceed forward with the contract. You guys see this right here? It starts on line 124. If you don't, the seller then has 3 days with which they can cancel the contract.
But your question, I don't think said that.
It does.
I think your
Well,
question
I
didn't
didn't
say
say
that.
all those words, but I gave the scenario. The loan approval ended on March 5th. It was supposed to close on March 8th. Can the seller send a release and cancellation on March 6th?
But you didn't put that they didn't receive. The reason
I
I said
didn't tell you
no-
what. Lewis, I can't give you everything. Come
Well,
on.
no, if they
that's
didn't
my tricky part of my
receive,
question. I didn't say how or why they could do it. The question is, could they? And the answer is they can if they didn't receive the loan approval period. You got to get to know me. I can't give you everything. Come on. You got to think a little here. This is why.
if I was a betting man, I'd be fighting you on that.
No, you would lose right here. It's right here in the contract. And I can tell you why, because during 2022, this happened all the time. It was awful. And it was my sellers calling me, even the listing agents. My seller wants to know how can they get out. And I'd have to tell them, if you do not receive in writing, and it has to use those words, that they've received loan approval and they plan to continue, or they've not received loan approval, but they plan to, and it can't be from the lender either. You know, those lenders send those notices, those don't work. It has to be from the buyer's agent or the buyer, which is not going to happen, with those words by the loan approval period. One time, we were on both sides. It was Daniel and Carol. It was horrible. Carol was on the buy side. Daniel was on the listing side. I couldn't tell either one. Daniel was like, Carol, make sure Carol does it right, but I can't talk to her. I'm like, I can't tell Carol that because we're on both sides. And I'm like, Carol, I know you're really good at your contract. So, you know, just saying. Thank God she did. It was great because we had a backup offer that the seller wanted to take. That's what was happening. Thankfully, we didn't get to do that one. Close. But this is what happens, guys. You have a backup offer. The seller wants to move on the backup offer, but can't. But this is where they could. They could get out if the buyer didn't do this. Now, here's the question. Does the buyer get their money back? Yes, because the seller would be canceling and they would have to assume that the buyer was going to close cash, right? Because they had to make that assumption. So if the buyer didn't close, obviously then they'd lose the money, right? But if the seller was canceling, they'd have to give back the deposit. But you still had a homeless buyer who was probably not very happy. We had a lot of them. It was very terrible. We hated it. But this was one of the things that happened. So, you know, how often you'd go into contract and then 2 days later, you get a great backup offer. What do? That was the only way the seller had to get out. You'd have to wait it out. And the seller was waiting to see what would happen. Did it happen? Did it happen? It was horrible. Terrible. So this is a real thing that happened a lot. Now, I don't see it happening a ton lately, but it's still here in our contract. And if you're the buyer's agent, you better be on top of it because you got to know you're the one that has to send that loan approval, that notice of loan approval that they're going to move forward or they're not by the loan approval period. Okay. All right, moving on. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, too much pressure.
I have a quick question on that. If
Yeah.
the lender send the email?
Doesn't work.
Okay.
Lender does not count. Okay, the section in regards to special assessments has to do with homeowners associations, true or false? False. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? We will go towards it.
No.
So it says right here. Special assessments. At closing, the seller shall pay the full amount of liens imposed by the public body. And it says seller shall pay installments due prior to closing, buyer shall pay installments due after closing, seller shall pay in full at the time of closing. Is that about homeowners associations? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Does not include condominium or homeowners association right there. 189. Nobody ever knows what that's for. That's, let's say they widen the road and so the county's giving you something for that. That's what those are for. It's usually the county taxes are increased, something like that, but it has nothing to do with homeowners association or condominium association.
Doesn't relate to a CDD, does it?
No, it's not a CDD.
So
Okay.
what do you normally, like, I normally put A, but a lot of these that we.
I love that question. What do you normally put? And here's my legal answer. It depends. Because am I on the buy side or the sell side? If I'm on the buy side, seller shall pay in full. Why would I say that? Because I want to know if there's any special assessments. So they're going to come back and say, you picked the wrong one. I love when they say that. It's so funny. They always say that. And I said, why? Are there some special assessments I need to know about? Because they don't know. Nobody even knows what this is about. Now, if I'm on the seller side, I'm going to pick A. Seller should pay installments due prior to closing. Buyer should pay installments due after closing. But if the buyer is like, well, what special assessments are there? You got to know, right? Are there special assessments coming? Are they widening the road? Are there any projects coming in the area that they're going to be assessing the homeowners? I mean, it's very untypical, but sometimes there are. And if there are, the homeowner should know about it.
So if I'm on the list side and the owner knows that there's no special assessments,
Pick
it's okay
B.
if they check B.
Yeah.
if the buyer don't.
I mean, that'd be okay. But if I'm on the list side, I really like A better. Yeah.
Carrie.
Yes.
Carrie, if there's a lien, it's a cloud on the title.
Here's the thing. Is it a lien or is it not? For example, open permits are not a lien, but if it's a lien against the house, you're 100% right. So it depends on really what it is. Is an assessment may or may not be a lien. It depends on how they recorded it. So that's a good question, Max. I don't, and it depends. If it's through the government, it's a lien and you can't close it. But a lot of times, so you still have to decide who's paying what, right? And it should be. Sometimes though, these assessments are coming. They might have been notified, but they're not recorded yet. That's more so when these things come really, they're more important. Yeah, Casey.
But
Trying to do away with septic tanks. Making everyone tie in.
Yeah.
Is that a lien through the HOA? Is that?
Usually not. Casey said if they're doing away with septic tanks and they're making you tie in, that would probably not be the association. That would probably be the city or the county wherever you live. This one could be related to that directly. It's a great point. Yes, Matt. Next one. Question.
But in the listing, Carrie, in the listing interview with a potential buyer, when you're doing your due diligence and you're asking, assuming they have an HOA, you should always ask for the minutes of the last couple of, so you could see if there was.
HOA. Remember, this is not the HOA or the condominium. This is any kind of like government special assessments. This is something about the county or the city they live in. So this has nothing to do with that. So this is, they got, like, for example, like Casey's saying, they've said the city or the county is going to do away with the septic tanks and they're going to make them tie in. That's not their homeowners association. That's the city or the county.
Correct.
Yeah. But to your point, yes.
And how long is that assessed? How long is that for? A year contract, 6 months? What is the entirety of the 10 years? What is that for?
It's a great question, Jules, but it's going to be dependent upon each project. Like they're bad if you're down by the water because they have a lot with the sea docks and the seawalls and all of that stuff. Those are bad. But here, I don't know, the sewage ones tying into the sewage, probably 6 months to a year max. But I don't know. I mean, you'd have to find out. So these are great questions. But that one that she's talking about, that's going to be probably city or county, whatever, wherever you live in. So these are great
Harry,
questions. Yeah.
Harry, since this doesn't apply to HOAs,
Uh-huh.
what if there is an HOA assessment? How
Well,
does
HOA would be
do we need
that
to-
would be the addenda. Remember the homeowners association addenda that you have?
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep, exactly. And
Hmm.
that's where all that has to be on. And if you had a condominium, that's why you have to do condo rider A. Those where those would be.
Thanks.
Yep. So the energy brochure, guys, is that expected to be conveyed with all contracts?
Yes.
It sure is. Let's just take a little quick look. I mean, how many of you actually give it with your contracts? It says energy brochure, buyer acknowledges receipt of Florida energy rating brochure. They are signing in their contract that they got it.
I have them sign a copy of it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I always did too. Y'all should send it. You don't have to send it to the listing agent if you're on the buy side, but you really should send it to the buyer and have them initial it because they're saying they got it. Right there.
If they don't get it, they can cancel the contract.
I've never seen that quite happen, but I mean, I guess I could push towards, it's really not, it's not like homeowners association where they're telling you they have 3 days right of rescission. It's not really a right of rescission, but they are saying they received it. So, I mean, it is a tough thing. I would definitely say I would include it. I don't really know that they could cancel the, it's not a contingency, but I would definitely include it. So, all right. Lead-based paint, is it for all homes pre-1976? Is that the year? 78, good. Okay, true or false? Once the homeowners association addenda is signed and all documents are delivered, a 3-day contingency opens for the buyer, even if it's the day of closing. Is that true or false? Guys, that's true. They have to get all the documents and all of they need to get the financials, they have to get the deed restrictions, there's a whole list of them. As soon as they've received all that, a 3-day right of rescission opens. So if they don't get that to date of closing, they have a 3-day right of rescission. Which is why if you're the list side, you want to get it to them immediately. You don't want to wait. I mean, that's a terrible thing. People don't know that. So,
Harry?
yes.
But doesn't it terminate it once they close?
Well, if they've closed, but if
Yeah, I'm just saying
if they're
though.
like, I'm not going to close, I haven't got my homeowners association documents, right? And they've never initialed anything saying they've received it. Now you're in trouble because they've just started a 3-day, they've opened a 3-day right of rescission. They can cancel the contract and get their money back. Now, yes, to your point, if they never caught it and they closed, it's over, right? But if they catch it, and I'll tell you, investors are very savvy, and a lot of times they buy a bunch of homes and then they pull that, oh, I never received my docs, and then they just cancel a bunch of things. That was like a very common thing that they would do. So, but yeah, to your point, if you've closed, you've closed. But oftentimes what would happen is they would say at the 12th hour, oh, I haven't got my homeowner's docs. And as long as they haven't signed anything saying that they had, guess what? 3-day right of rescission opens. Now, condominium. How long is a condominium? 3 or 14 days? Who thinks it's 3 days? Who thinks it's 14 days? Right of rescission for a condo.
On a new condo, it's longer.
On a new condominium, it's 14, but on a resale condo, it's 3. All homeowners and condominium associations on resale are 3. But if you're
Harry,
purchasing a new one, it's 14. Yes.
if you send the documents by dot loop and it shows that they've opened and viewed it, that's
You're
enough,
covered.
right?
Yep, you're covered. But make sure that they have all of the things they need. They need the recent financials, they need the deed restrictions, they need articles of incorporation. We have a whole list. You need all of that. Okay. In an as-is contract, as long as the agent has gotten an addenda to the listing agent by the end of the inspection period, is the buyer safe so you can wait to get the decision about what the seller wants to do? So meaning, The the buyer's agent's asking for $5,000 in repairs, let's say, and the end of the as-is inspection period is the 31st. They get you the addenda that they want $5,000 by the 31st. You haven't gotten back to them yet. Are they covered? So November 1st, they're good. You still have time to get back. What do you guys? Who thinks that's true?
I would say no, and you'd want to send the cancellation if they're not going to agree to it.
Anybody else think it's true? I'm going to stop my share. Does anybody think it's true? Are they safe? Because they got it in by the 31st, by the end of the inspection period?
No, because it's not signed.
That's the beautiful thing, guys, of the as-is contract. Of course they're not safe. It's as is. You're buying it as is. The inspection period, you can ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars. You're buying this thing as is. If the seller chooses to help you with something, that's their choice. But come November 1st, in this specific instance, you're moving on. We don't care. If the seller doesn't respond, no response is your answer. And no response is a no. It doesn't matter. You can send 5 addendas. That agent needed to send a release and cancellation. And if they sent that, that means that they're canceling if they didn't get what they wanted. But if they didn't send that, thank you for sharing all the things you wanted to do, but we're not doing any of them. So, that is misunderstood greatly in our industry because nobody understands. They think that the as-is is this thing that they can play with, that they can go in on an as-is and ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars. And if you don't do what they want, they're going to cancel. Well, that sounds really good, but that's not really how this thing works. Now, in a residential contract, how does it work? As long as you get in the inspection report with the working condition items that are a problem by the end of the inspection period, in this case, October 31st, you're fine. Now begins the process. Okay, that's the difference. You don't have to have everything done and negotiated by the 31st. You just have to make sure you give them the summary of the inspection report by October 31st. And now the seller gets the estimates of repairs and the seller will get back to you. Okay, we've agreed to how many dollars in general repairs, how many dollars in wood destroying organisms, how many dollars in open repair and open permits. And then they get back to you with that. And now we're starting our negotiation, or they just take care of things because it's under the limits. That's the beauty of the residential contract, not the as-is. Everybody with me? That's the difference. Let me share. Okay. Okay. And an as-is contract, whose responsibility is it to take care of open permits? Anybody? Anybody think it's a buyer?
I think it's buyer.
Some people think it's the seller. Some people think it's the buyer. Some people are like, Carrie, I don't even want to try to answer that question.
Got a 50-50 chance because I would.
This is an as-is contract, guys. If buyer's inspection of the property identifies open or needed permits, the seller has to deliver all plans, written documentation, any knowledge if they have of the improvements. But guess what? It's the buyer's effort to obtain estimates and repairs to work to resolve the issues. If the seller has to sign anything, they do, but the buyer conducts the inspections, the buyer has the estimates of the repair done, and the seller shall not be required to spend any money. The buyer has to do it all, guys. And how often do you find out about open repairs open permits or needed permits or expired permits in the beginning? You usually find out about them past your inspection period, don't you? Now, is an open permit or a needed permit a cloud on your title? Nope. So can you close with an open permit or a needed permit or expired permit? You sure can.
How do you find out about it?
Well, you have to get a title company to do it, and a lot of title companies don't even want to do it now.
Well, could a lender have any issues with open permits?
I'm really not seeing a lender have a problem with an open lien search, with an open permit. Not really, no. Maybe with an FHA, maybe. I've really never seen a lender having a problem with it though, to be honest. But I've seen buyers having problems with it because it could possibly deter the value of their property. And that's the only way I've ever seen them to be able to get out of the contract, because it could reduce the value of their property. But you know what that means, guys? Lawsuit. They have to go to court to try to get out of it, to say it's going to determine it brings down the value of my property, and that's why I want to get out. But that's a lawsuit, and we're out of that. They have to hire an attorney to try to sue to get out, because they were buying it as is. That's the point, and they didn't catch it. So oftentimes they don't win that one either, because that's the whole point. They were buying it as is. Because if I'm a listing agent, guys, and I go in and I know that this is an old home, I might say to my seller, you might want to sell this as is. Right? Just like if I'm going with the buyer and I know there's an old roof on that house, I'm going to recommend that you buy it with an as-is contract, because I know that in a residential contract, limited roof life is not considered something that the seller has to take care of. It's not, anything working condition. So I'm going to suggest, because they might be able to get insurance, but it might be really expensive. So I'm going to say, let's go in an as-is, try to find out insurance really quickly, and so we can cancel if we can't. Right? So I'm going to try to use the contracts either way too, aren't I? But you see, that's the problem. It's all on the buyer for open permits, expired permits, or necessary permits. And remember, if you're buying an old house and they did work, God forbid, they turned a bedroom in from a garage, it's a bad one. Oftentimes, those inspectors will make you bring it to current day, and if that's super expensive to try to bring to today's code, oh my God, it's terrible. Or they'll just make you rip it out. So if that's the case, I mean, it could cost you more than you'd ever guaranteed that you thought it would cost. And that's a problem. Maybe it's just closing out a permit, it's usually not a big deal. But if it's needed to get permits, never had unpermitted work, it could be bad. You don't know. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. So what I highly recommend is we have a clause in our dot loop written by an attorney that basically puts all of that onto the seller. So if you're going to use an as-is contract, you want to use the clause that we have in dot loop, basically saying that any open, expired, or needed permits falls on the seller. Okay, everybody good on that? All right, well, we have to end because unfortunately we're out of time. I hope you all had some fun with our contract roulette. Woo! It was a lot of
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you. So on Monday, we're going to do how to do a really winning, that was crazy, open houses, how to get a lot of people through your open houses. And so that will be our Monday training. Sound good?
Awesome.
And I'm going to be in Lake and Dr. Phillips on Thursday because Jackie, our president, is coming to visit me. So my Thursday day has been changed. So I have some time slots open in Dr. Phillips on Thursday. So it's obviously first come, first serve. So text me, call me, get to me quick. Okay. Hope to see you all for business planning. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.